Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Juliet Singler coming to you with week 2 of History of Rock and Roll. I want to highlight a few things that I think will be helpful for you in the introductory chapter. I think you're reading pages 3 through 33 this week. And so we're going to take a look at what's that sound, and I want to highlight form in particular. So the first form that was discussed is a simple verse form. This is basically a form that repeats the same music over and over again. I'm going to show you an example of that in the song Rocket 88. This is the original version of the song, by the way, recorded by Jackie Brenston. Hey, I wanted to count them off with my fingers so that you could see there's 12 beats, 12 measures in every section of the song, 4 beats to a measure. So I was doing the micro beats: 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4, and then counting the number of measures in each section. So the vocals are coming in here, and you're going to see that the music repeats over again exactly the same. This song is widely recognized as the first rock and roll song in about 1951. So I backed it up just a little bit so that we can get the vocals coming in. You women have heard of jalopy, you heard the noise they made, but let me introduce my new Rocket 88. Yes, it's straight, just one way. Everybody likes my Rocket 88. They will ride in style, moving all along. There you go, 12 beats, 12 measures in each section, 4 beats to each measure. Now, this particular song has a chord pattern that we often see in this simple verse form. It's called a 12-bar blues pattern. So the only thing to remember about that is that it's a particular pattern that features a 1 chord, a 4 chord, and a 5 chord. Your book explains about Roman numeral analysis, and just suffice it to say that we use Roman numerals to denote the chords based on a 7-note scale. So if you build a chord on the first tone of the scale, let's say you're in C major, if you build it on C, that would be a 1 chord. If you build it on the 4th tone of the scale, that would be F, that would be an F chord. If you build it on the 5th tone of the scale, that would be G, that would be a 5 chord. So a 1-4-5 pattern in that 12-bar blues pattern. Here's another example of that same simple verse pattern. It's called Shaboom Shaboom, and I'm going to play the version by The Chords. Now, in this song, you're going to find 8 measures in each section. I'll count those off for you so you see where that's going. And it has a different chord pattern. It doesn't have the 12-bar blues pattern at all. It has a particular chord structure that's unique to what we call doo-wop, or you find this often in a broader category that we call soft rock. But you're going to find the 1 chord, a 6 chord, a 2 chord, and a 5 chord. 1 chord, 6 chord, a 2 chord, and a 5 chord in this. All right, I'm going to count the measures off as we go. Life could be a dream, life could be a dream. Here we go. Life could be a dream. If I could take you up in paradise up above. If you would tell me I'm the only one that you love. Life could be a dream. Sweetheart, hello, hello, dear. So we've got that. Good, good. You heard that. It is arranged in 8 measure sections for this song. That was the crew cuts. That was the chords. And here's the crew cuts singing the same song. This is neat too, because between the years of, say, 1950 to 1955, there was a lot of dissension among Americans about rock and roll. It wasn't the popular art form that it is today. The art form was coming up through African American culture, and because there was so much more prejudice than there is today, white parents didn't want their kids to have anything to do with rock and roll. Sometimes that resulted in two versions being made of a song. The first version we made was with an African American group, and the second version is with a white group, the Crew Cuts. So you can hear some differences in their performances. It's coming up.
Oh, life could be a dream if I could take you up in paradise up above. If you would tell me I'm the only one that you love. Life could be a dream, sweetheart. Hello, hello again. Shaboom, and hoping we'll meet again. Oh, life could.
Okay, so I had to start my count over again because there was an introduction, you may have noticed, for 4 measures. And then when the vocals came in, that was the real beginning of the song. All right, yeah, so you can hear that it's a different type of recording. It's a little bit more evenly mixed and kind of slick, and there's a balance between the vocals and the background instruments that is more pronounced than in the original recording by the chords. Let's move on to another form. The next form is simple verse chorus, and in simple verse chorus, the music for the verse is the same as the chorus. And you know, the chorus will also repeat the lyrics exactly almost every time. So let's go to a version of this that is from country music, because remember I said that there were 3 strains of music that bubbled up and became rock and roll. It was country music, blues, and popular music. So here's an example of a classic country music song recorded by a great country music family, the Carter family. I don't know if you know the singer Johnny Cash. Do you remember Johnny Cash's song Ring of Fire? It's one of my favorites. Johnny Cash married June Carter, one of the daughters in this family singing ensemble. So here's a great folk hymn recorded by the Carter family. Can the Circle Be Unbroken?
I was standing by the window on one cold and cloudy day, and I saw the hearse come rolling for to carry my mother away. Oh, can the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by? There's a bitter home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky.
All right, so I think you can hear that the music for the chorus, Can the Circle Be Unbroken, is the same as the verse that preceded it. We're going to move on to another form, AABA. This was a form that was more typical of the popular music that preceded rock and roll. So popular music of the late 40s was a lot different than popular music today. First of all, it often featured really beautiful singing. A lot of the popular songs were drawn from the musical theater stage, and at that time, it featured really gorgeous singing. Also, it had particular origins in not only musical theater, but also Tin Pan Alley. That was a particular part of New York where composers would go to play their songs at music stores. So, for instance, the great composer George Gershwin would have gone to Tin Pan Alley and played a piano sitting outside of a music store to get his songs heard to the public. We didn't have radios in those days. We're talking about the early years of the 1900s. And that's how he would have sold songs, by playing them, word of mouth, print publications. So those songs that are from Tin Pan Alley, and popular composers like Stephen Foster, for instance, and also from the musical theater stage, would have had this AABA form. Here's an example of a song that has AABA form. It's Great Balls of Fire by Jerry Lee Lewis. I'm pulling that up. Hold on a second. It's coming up.
You shake my nerves and you rattle my brain. You left the nerve, left the man insane. You broke my will, what a thrill. Goodness, you raised two great balls of fire.
Okay, now I know you heard Goodness Gracious, Great Balls of Fire, and you're going to hear that again. And you might think, well, that's the chorus, but nope, that's just the end of this verse that's coming up. So we're going to hear another verse. So that was A. We're going to hear another A, and then we'll hear something different coming through in the B section. And then the verse returning again after the B section. Okay, that was the B section. Now we're going to come back to the verse again for the return of A. And then he gets to play an instrumental section after that. Great, so I hope you understand. A, B, A. Contrasting verse, chorus. This is music where you have different music for the verse than the chorus. I have a great example of that contrasting verse chorus in the song That'll Be the Day by Buddy Holly and the Crickets. Hey, remember their name. It's going to be important when we talk about the Beatles.
Well, that'll be the day. Say goodbye, yeah, that'll be the day. When you make the cry, you say you're gonna leave. You know it's a lie, cause that'll be the day. When I die, well, all you love and you the hurt, darling. All you love to treat is and your money too. Well, you know you love me, baby. Till you tell me, baby, that someday, well, I'll be well.
Okay, I hope you heard that. I was counting off 8 measure sections, and when he starts with, well, that'll be the day, that's the chorus. He starts with the chorus, and then the second section he starts with, will you give me all your lovin' and your turtle dovin'? That's the verse, okay? And I don't know if you could hear it, but the music for the verse was slightly different than the chorus. Definitely had some different chords and a slightly different melody. So you can talk about any of those forms when you talk about your song and present your song to the group. You can also talk about the instruments that are involved. I think I mentioned early rock and roll has different instruments than later rock and roll. If it's a rockabilly artist like Buddy Holly, you might see a stand-up bass in the ensemble, which is something you don't usually see, an acoustic stand-up bass in the ensemble for rockabilly. But in early rock and roll, generally you see an electric bass, a rhythm guitar, a lead guitar, drums. Sometimes also in early rock and roll, you'll hear a saxophone. Maybe if it's a soft rock song, you might hear some terrific background vocals coming in, or you might hear some other instruments coming in to sweeten the tone, like strings or brass instruments that would have been part of the big band era. Also talk about the role of recording techniques in the songs that you're listening to. Is it live or mixed? Different sounds for those two. Do you hear any reverb or echo or maybe distortion in the sound? Do you hear equalization, kind of a balance being made between the treble and bass partials in each instrument? Is it mono placement or stereo placement for the overall sound? Big difference there. What's going on, in other words, with the mixing in the song? Hey, I hope you've enjoyed this little mini lecture, and I hope you'll have fun describing your song.